Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides Podcast. I'm Keaton, and this is...
I'm Kyle.
But first, a word from our partners.
First up, we want to talk about Heather's Choice. If you go to the Heather's Choice website and use our code TheYoungGuides15 at checkout, you can get yourself 15% off site-wide. So go check them out. We got packaroons for snacks. We got dinners. We got breakfasts. We got a bunch of new recipes coming out to you guys. So head on over to heatherschoice.com at checkout. Use our code TheYoungGuides15 and get you guys something for your next outdoor adventure.
Awesome. For our next partner, we have Lucky Bug Lures, home of the Bingo Bug, Zombie Max, Fusion Extreme, Lucky Plug, F-Bomb, and Pike Bomb. They take conventional lures and change them up a little bit, and it helps your fishing and your luck on the water. Go check them out. www.luckybuglures.com. Go get yours today.
All right. Up next, we have Northern Knits. Emily up here in Anchorage knits wool hats and distributes them through her social media platforms. You can find her on Facebook or on Instagram. Her Instagram account is northern._.knits. And you can see some of the hats that she has in stock and order from there, or you can kind of get an idea of what you want, message her, and you can set something up to have a specific pattern or color scheme that you want in your hat. Keaton and I both have one. Well, I actually have several. Keep you very warm. They're very fashionable. They look great. They feel great. You'll look awesome if you wear one. So check her out, Northern Knits.
Next up, we have a friend, Matt, at Alaska Rod Co. He just released a new lineup of rods for the 2022 season. They have a lineup of 8 freshwater spinning rods with actions and power for anglers chasing big, aggressive fish. With lengths ranging from 6 foot to 9 foot, there are plenty of options for various applications and style. In a world full of mass-produced rods, Alaska Rod Co. makes sure that rods and services provide what other brands cannot. Rods built and tested in Alaska.
Matt also is coming out with a new line of fly rods. Alaska Rod Co. fly rods are built for harsh environments while maintaining the utmost level of craftsmanship. Right now, Alaska Rod Co. is 9-foot fly rods ranging from 5 weights to 8 weights. 10-foot single-hand rods, switch, and spare rods will be available late winter or spring. There's enough rod companies out there trying to build the next lightest and flashy rod. Alaska Rod Co. is here to build you a rod you can pass down generations. Fishing means many things to many different people. Alaska Rod Co. is honored to build you the ultimate tool that connects you to that meaning.
If you want to learn a little bit more about Alaska Rod Company, go back and check our previous podcast. We asked him several questions about his rods, his warranties. He does a great job at explaining everything and covering everything about his company. Also, if you have questions, you can always DM him or DM us and we can get you going in the right direction. So, Alaska Rod Co.
Finally, we want to say thank you for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. If you can, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review and a rating. It helps us know that we're doing this for the right reasons, and you guys are giving us some great feedback already. You can also head over to Spotify. They now have a rating feature on the podcast there. So if you could let us know how we're doing, that would be great. It also helps helps us spread the word through you. But makes us pop up on the feeds wherever you listen to podcasts a lot more if you give us a great rating and a great review. You can also head to our website and contact us through that form if there's anything that you think we should know about, if you want to be on our show, or if there's something that we need to work on. You can also find us on Instagram, and same thing, give us some feedback, drop us a message, and we will get back to you.
With Instagram, make sure to also check our story. We before we do our podcast on Thursdays, we always have an option for you guys to ask questions to the people coming on our podcast. And we post a lot of stuff that we like to get viewers and people following us involved. So if you want to head on over, give us a follow and start asking questions and join in on the fun on our Instagram page.
Without further ado, here's the episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. I'm Keaton, and
I'm Kyle.
And today's guest is Trevor Covich and Caylen Phegley, and they're steelhead guides out on the Olympic Peninsula. We wanted to get them on and kind of chat about what's going on the Olympic Peninsula, talk about their situations as guides with the closures happening. So we're really excited to have both of them on. We're getting a kind of a fly fishing side to it and a gear side to it, and we can't wait to hear about it. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
Doing good. Yeah, thanks you guys for hopping on with us tonight. It's kind of cool. This is our first podcast where we have two guests on at the same time. So it should be pretty fun.
Yeah, we've Kaylen and I have known each other for a while now. Actually, we met through Instagram only because I think I put up a picture of some place I used to fish as a kid, and Caylen was the only other guy that I knew who knew exactly where that spot was, and so I've never talked to anybody else who knew that place, so we kind of instantly bonded from there. And he's a cool dude. So like
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool running into another guy that learned how to salmon and steelhead fish on another little river that you also did. And
in fishing, we're polar opposites, but also like-minded in a lot of ways, you know, because I do the fly fishing thing. He's the gear chunker, you know, sniper. And so it's nice rattling off fishing stuff with another guy that does something totally different. You know, you learn a lot from other people that do something different, but are also super fishy people.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Figure out different, types of water to fish, and kind of you see different things from, fly fishing and gear fishing.
yeah, it was super nice chatting with Trevor and, just getting around just talking about fishing and where he liked to fish and his style, because it's a completely different gear choice and where you need to be in order to fish properly with that gear, and listening to both sides. And I think we both kind of fish a little bit of each other's water now, because we have a little better idea of not just gear spot, not just swing spot. And it's definitely been interesting.
And the one thing we both really like to do is when the weather gets really messed up around here, Caylen usually calls me, and then we throw the chainsaw in the back of the truck. We just ride around and look for stuff to either cut up or just see what the river's doing. Because especially this last November when the water got biblically high, watching just kind of the devastation was pretty incredible. And to see that stayed with your own eyes is something a lot of people get to see. So.
Yeah. Mother Nature can do some gnarly stuff, and I mean, even in some of the rivers in the area I'm around, it's crazy to see.
It's cool just to see how powerful Mother Nature is. We were driving around. I think we drove around almost every creek and river.
Because every creek that was going across 101, essentially just spit a bunch of rocks and boulders over the main highway.
Wow.
And so, and like I said, I've never seen that much water. And then we pulled, the craziest stuff was when we pulled into the Hoe to a place called Minnie's, which is a boat launch, and watching the river literally almost parallel with the top, and of course the dogs trying to go get a drink of water. And looking upstream, and there were so many logs coming down the river, and then when I remember we wrapped around and we went up good in the main line and came down to Bogus Hill, and there's a section below a bridge there below the Hatchery stretch wall. There's a bunch of plunking shacks there that have been there for a long time, and essentially the river was up to the roof on every single one of those plunking shacks, and the second tier of branches and alders that are all along the river, which is something I had never seen here in my life. I mean, we had guys throwing drift boats around town.
Yeah.
It was biblical. It was unbelievable.
Hey, Trevor. Do you mind speaking a little bit closer to the phone? It sounds like you're a little bit away. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So tell us a little bit about then kind of the area you guys are talking about. Where are you guys based out of? Where do you guys fish?
Yeah, me and Trevor out of Forks, Washington on the Olympic Peninsula. We fish pretty much any river within an hour and a half or so of us. And we just are salmon and steelhead trophy junkies.
It's every like, for example, I bought my house right next to one of my favorite boat launches, and every day when you wake up, essentially being a fishing guide out here in the winter, the water fluctuates constantly. So you look at your phone, you see what the river's doing, and then you can essentially pick any place you want to go depending on what's happening due to the water conditions. And not only do we have a multitude of different rivers to choose from, but you have a bunch of different sections. So you essentially get to choose a different canvas every day and go to it. So if you have a guy who's coming to fish with you for a week, he can see a different place every single day and then fish a different river almost every day. But for how close the rivers are here, they're all so far different in structure, substrate, the look at them from glacial to super clear. When you look at the sole duck and the Kalawa versus the bogus shell and the hoe, they're all so different from each other, and it's just really fun to get to know how these rivers fish, and they're beautiful, every one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you guys grow up fishing out on the Olympic Peninsula, or did you fish some other rivers growing up and then just kind of found your way out that way?
I moved over here when I was 2 years old, and so I've spent my whole life here. And the first taste of fishing I got was fishing out in the straits in the ocean. I grew up on a 21-foot glass ply, trolling even owls and coyote 6-0s out in the straits out of CQ, and we had to get rid of the ocean boat. So I was a junkie and needed to learn how to fish the rivers, which we had some of the coolest rivers right in our backyard. And so I started salmon fishing in the rivers, and then had to go chase the ghost of 1,000 casts and got that out of the way. And so I learned how to do salmon and steelhead just on these little creeks that me and Trevor actually grew up on, and got a drift boat when I was 16, started rowing the Salt Duck, which wasn't the best river to learn how to row, but you got good quick or you didn't get good at all. And so I got a drift boat when I was 16. best Christmas present ever as a kid, just a homemade welded drift boat, and started taking it down the Salt Duck and learning the routes and the trails and getting the feel of how the hydraulics and everything worked. So everything I've learned and known is started from out here, which makes it that much more sacred and special to me.
Yeah. And the rivers out there have to be changing like all the time. I mean, I can only imagine. I do a lot of the fishing in Eastern Washington, but there's not as many factors that play in per se to like compared to like the Olympic Peninsula.
It's totally different. Like if you put the Methow, the Wenatchee, the Grand Ronde, the Snake, the Clearwater, all those, like, it's just a much wider space and just not as much rainfall, and then the stuff doesn't move around, and then there's not all these giant old growth trees that are coming down there and getting lodged into places where gravel then, I mean, I'll just use the Hoe as the greatest example. The Hoe is the most untamed river out here that I guide, and every year it's different. After every high water, it's different, and it's a river that you have to constantly do your homework on, or else the spot you loved last week or last year is no longer going to be there. So, and the Soul Duck, for example, is a river that doesn't change a lot. The rapids will change a little bit as the logs flow down and hit boulders around, and it'll change the stuff around a bit. But I think Caylen will tell you the same thing, that we've been catching fish in front of and behind the same boulders for a while, and a lot of times the traveling lanes and kind of the holding spots at certain water levels, they don't really change much because that's where they live.
The only fluctuations I'll see is, I mean, boulders will roll because of hydraulics and everything, but it's weird. It's probably super hard for Trevor to notice it as much because he's swinging, but when I'm gear fishing with a flow or whatever, the Soul Duck will change, but you will never notice it because it's the bottom of the river that changes, and different hydraulics, different swirls will come in that never were in the run, that now you won't even catch a steelhead out of that run where you've caught 30 steelhead the last season or something. It's really interesting seeing those changes, but I mean, compared to, even the bogus eel or the Hoe or the Queets, those rivers, they're always moving. They're never not moving. So it's different.
Yeah.
And so, Trevor, it sounds like you grew up. Did you grow up there in Forks as well, fishing all those rivers?
So I grew up in Issaquah, Washington, but my father was a saltwater fish in the Strait also. So my brother and I would get towed out there every weekend in salmon season. My father bought into a piece of property on the CQ River with 3 other guys from Boeing that he worked with. And they were just a bunch of saltwater fishermen, jack of all trades dudes, just mechanics that worked on airplanes. And so they built this really modest place with, like, we had a party building, a shower house, then like guys would pull their trailers up, and then people would just salmon fish essentially all summer long.
Yeah.
And we'd salmon fish, we'd rock fish. And then in the wintertime, my father was kind of trying to develop a better spot for ourselves. So he had my brother and I digging ditches up there in the dead of winter. And it was to the point where I still wanted to go fishing, and I heard about, and I would go cutthroat fishing essentially. And one time I went up there cutthroat fishing, and I hooked a fish that wasn't a cutthroat, and it destroyed me. And it was about a 12-pound wild female steelhead, and that was when I was 12. And so essentially at that point I was like, dude, the ski slope doesn't have its same luster as it used to have. There's too many people out there. I could come out here, and where the CQ River is situated, there's kind of a logging road that runs next to it. And of course I didn't have my driver's license, so I'd either ride my bike or I got smart and I'd wait out at the road and I'd throw my thumb out for the logging trucks, and the logging trucks would pick me up, and I'd be riding on the back of the logging truck up the river, and then I'd bang on the back of the cab when I wanted them to stop and let me off. And then I'd fish all day. And then when I would want to come home, I knew when they would be leaving to come back when they get off work, and I'd do the same thing. And then I'd hop in the back of a truck with the diesel tank and everything, and you're sitting there. And at this point I was a gear fisherman. I had fly fished a lot, but it was for trout. But when I started steelhead fishing, I was curing eggs, and I was using sand shrimp. Sand shrimp was my favorite, just because the cutthroat couldn't smack them near as easy, and the steelhead really liked them. And I essentially started doing that until I got to high school. And then when I got to high school, a girlfriend of mine worked in the attendance office, and so I got her to mark me essentially at school, and I'd skip school with like 2 of my buddies, and I'd head out there for 3-day weekends. We'd fish all weekend.
Nice.
And then yeah, no, it was great. And again, no pressure, and we were catching a lot of really nice steelhead, and there was plenty of them, and we had a sweet spot. I mean, it was awesome. But and then when I wasn't going out there, I'd fish like the Snoqualmie, the Tolt, and the Green, I guess, were the main rivers that I fished near Issaquah. But they were great, but that was one when I couldn't essentially make it out to the coast. The coast is a special place, you know. There's just it's just cooler out there. I mean, no traffic.
Yeah. Living the life out there.
A lot like Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
What us and a lot of our clients say.
Oh,
it's untamed. Cool.
Yeah.
So this question's kind of towards Trevor. You kind of, you talked about growing up gear fishing and stuff. When did you really make the switch to fly fishing?
So when I made the switch to the fly fishing, as far as the swinging standpoint, I was 17 years old, and I was up. It was my first season on the Connecticut River in Alaska, and I was a camp hand. And I met a guy named George Cook, who is a rep in the fly fishing industry, and essentially he would do these spay clinics at night on the river with our clients, and I drove this huge boat, and I would ferry clients around. He gave me a spay rod, and I started hucking it pretty good because I was all balls, no brains. And I had essentially raw energy, but not a lot of technique. But I could still bomb it out there pretty good. And so I go, man, maybe it'd be kind of cool to try this out on the river. So when winter came along, I started going and near the sea here was a river called the Hoko River, which was a bit larger. And so I started kind of swinging some flies there, and I was fishing in a spot. I remember it was a tail out. I had 5 feet of T14 on and a black and red fly unweighted. And I put it next to the bank, and the fish absolutely smoked me to the point where when it ate my fly, it jumped. And on the Hoko River, you have all these low hanging trees. And when the fish ate the fly, it jumped up, smacked the tree branches, and there was a cart coming by on the road that's right next to the thing. The car stopped, and these 2 old guys got out, and they're like, holy shit, that's a nice fish. I'm like a starry-eyed kid. I'm like, hey, can you guys like come down and take my picture if I land this thing, And they're like 70, And so I land the thing, and they're like, I make them scurry down a bank, and back then there was of course no iPhones. We had those stupid disposable cameras, so they snapped a couple pictures of disposable cameras, and it was like a 14-pound hen, but just incredible. It was on January 5th. That's the coolest thing about steelhead, is that when you get one that really knocks your socks off, like you remember everything about it, where you were, time of year, all this stuff. And I took them fishing for the rest of the day because it was their first day fishing that river, and they didn't know anything. And I was so happy that they took my picture, that I was like, hey, why don't you get here, just follow me around, I'll take you some spots. And they were throwing jigs and stuff like that, just really nice guys. But that was kind of the start. And so I just started swinging flies after that, essentially. So
Nice. Caylen, are you a purist on the gear rod, or do you try your hand at fly fishing here and there?
I do a little bit of everything. Me and Trevor went out a few times. We usually end up going out when there's the least possible chance and the least possible river. Because it's December.
We're scouting. We're scouting,
making sure the first trip down the river, there's not a fog, whatever, or it's blown out or whatever it is. But I played around with it a little bit. The thing I keep coming up to, which I'm sure will slow down as I get older, is when I finally have a day off come steelhead season, and especially now how sacred every day is with the limiting amount of days. I usually want to go out and get them myself, and I haven't really decided just to grab the fly rod and take off for the one day a month. I get to go enjoy some steelhead action by myself or something. But we made a trip down to the John Day last year and did some fly fishing down there, and it's been fun learning how to do it and just seeing the different types of water. I think everybody should grab any kind of technique and give it a whirl, and you learn a lot from it. I mean, I've learned a ton from it, even with casting gear rods. I mean, my famous quote is slower is better, and it's pretty much the same thing when it comes to spade fishing. When I was trying to chuck my fly all the way across the river, I'm like, the harder you throw it, the shorter it goes. And I don't really know where to put my power in. It helps when you got somebody like Trevor right next to you to be like, all right, this is where you put it. But yeah, no, I'll grab it around. I mainly center pin fish, which is deer fishing. And I just enjoy center pin fishing because it's you and the fish. There's nothing that's making it easier for you, 8-to-1 or whatever it is. And you are custom drag the entire time. So if you blow it, it's you. Period. And I like that, having your own drag. And it's a little bit of, it's like you pretty much made nymphing a lot more fine-tuned, I guess you say.
For sure. I've got I know a guy that goes out with my outfitter quite a bit up here, and he center pins, and it's a different ball game. It's like you kind of like get the best of both worlds, of both fly fishing and spin fishing.
It's lethal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
lethal.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a mixture because you actually enjoy casting again, which seems like that's what a lot of fly fishermen tend to like.
And Kaylen and I have tried to make it out fishing on the same day for seasons, and the problem is we guide so much, and then we go, hey, essentially we end up booking the day we're supposed to go fish with each other because we do stuff to make a living, and
or we take the day off.
Yeah, but I really want him to get smoked by a fish on the fly rod because I want to see how his thought process changes, quite frankly, because he's he's a gear guy and he's really good at it. But I think that if he had the opportunity to fight one of these things on a swung fly and actually feel the thing from the start to the finish, I think that it would change his thinking on some things, and maybe on his days off he might chuck the starvation stick a little bit, and because it is worth it. It's not the quantity, it's the quality of the experience, and that's why a lot of guys will go hungry for a long time in order to get one smash and grab. I mean, that's what I want. I root for the fish. I mean, if your guy loses a fish, it's not the worst thing in the world, especially if he gets the ass handed to him. Yeah. It's because he'll still remember it and he'll be telling his buddies about it for years to come. So
I think subconsciously too, I've always wanted, since I kind of got into fly fishing after me and Trevor met, I've always wanted that to happen with Trevor. And one of these days we'll finally actually get out some and decent conditions and we'll make it happen. But I think it would be great to do it with him and it'd be fun.
One thing too is I always feel like catching fish, you want to catch fish, you want to get those fish into your hands, but sometimes the most memorable moments that I've had is the fish that I didn't get in my hand, that I fought for like 10 minutes and lose it, right? You're like, those just, it keeps me coming back in some ways.
That's my addiction with steelhead fishing is, I think most people are like this, is each one's different. So I want to see each one. Yeah. And if I don't get to see it before it comes off, I'm kind of heartbroken. But as long as I see that fish, I'm stoked just to see what that one looked like before it disappeared.
Exactly.
So what got you guys into guiding? What made you think like you wanted to make a career out of it? We can start with, I guess, maybe Trevor first.
I got started guiding for steelhead by complete accident. I never wanted to be a steelhead guide ever because if you're a steelhead guide, that means you're not going steelheading in the physical sense, right? So
Yep.
I was a steelhead bum out here for a lot of years, and at that point in time, I was still doing some weird stints in South America and the Bahamas and stuff like that. And I would come out here for a couple months at a time, and I would live in my truck, or I'd live at sea where I stayed on somebody's couches. And then a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Jerry French, he was guiding swing anglers out here, and there really wasn't any swing guys out here. You know, there were some guys that were the bisexual guys. They were the guys who do a little bit of swing and a little bit of nymphing, but that was there was no guys that were doing it full on. But Jerry was the guy that essentially got me into it, but it was by total accident. He had a guy kind of working for him, and rivers got blown out one weekend. The guy that was working for him went to go drive home to, I think, Stanwood, and he ended up blowing his truck. And anyway, so his truck's out of commission. He can't do anything, and so he calls me and he goes, "Hey, can you run a couple trips, or can you do this? Because I've got some people coming in. I'm doing some big trips." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." Like, I already knew the river, and all I did was swim flies anyway. So, and then essentially, and I've been guiding in Alaska, but that's all I did. You know, just to fuel my gas money for winter steelhead season, and then guide some other places. But essentially, that's kind of where that started. And then I go, mentally, I'm still fishing, so I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I can watch somebody else get railed on, and that's equally as awesome. So, and now I can actually make a living at it. So, and I think that's the main thing, is that when people talk about fishing guides out here, not one fishing guide that is guiding for steelhead that I know of got into this because they thought they were going to make a bunch of money doing it. They all got into it because they loved fishing for steelhead, and then it kind of just segued into it, or they fell into it. You know, you're not going to be a millionaire doing this, but you're going to have some really quality experiences, and like, especially when I talk to young guys out there, you have a chance every single day to have people that are older than you, more successful than you, in your boat, and while they're trying to learn stuff from you about fishing, you should be taking the opportunity to learn something from them about your life, and whether that's love, finances, just stupid stuff like that. But you should be going to school every day, and not to mention, these people have a lot of contacts, and maybe they have a nice house in Florida that you want to go take your girlfriend to, and they have a place to stay. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you start getting these friends from all around the country, and then all around the world, and being smart enough to retain those contacts is something that I didn't know when I was a younger guy. Every person that came, they went. I didn't try and hold a personal relationship with them, but some of my greatest friends now are my clients, and you get the clients that you really love. It's not really work anymore. You just having fun with your friends, and you get paid doing it. So.
Yeah.
What Trevor was just, go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, what Trevor was talking about at the end there with meeting people and learning from them, I've definitely noticed that. It's amazing being able to just walk up to somebody, meet them in the morning, and you're out in the river in the dark or whatever, and you guys are chatting about, could be legal problems, it could be psychological. I mean, the guy, real estate. Yeah, no, I've learned a ton from my clients. They've helped me a ton. And like,
and it's two sides of the coin, because like
not to jump in on Caylen's thing, but let's just talk about marriage and relationships. Like one guy will have 3 divorces. Okay. The next guy will be married for 50 years. Okay. Yeah. And so you can listen to both sides of the coin, but you still have to make your own decisions on a lot of things. Okay. So you can hear this on every different, idea that comes up in the boat.
Yeah.
So, Caylen, when did you start guiding, and what made you start guiding?
I started in summer of 2018, fall of 2018. So 3 days after I graduated high school, being wingnut and fishing my whole life since I was 2, I always wanted to go to Alaska. 3 days after I graduated, was on a Crystal Bay commercial fishing boat up there. Did that and came back home, spent a year fishing around here, first year not having school, just freedom. So did that, and I went to lineman school, which was always the plan, and got through my lineman school, started looking for jobs, got a job down in, Castle Rock, Washington for Magnum Power. And I was doing that for a little bit and started to notice just, everybody in the trade around you, their lives who are older than you. And I mean, growing up in a small town, a lot of blue collar guys who, work their entire lives. And you hear about how much everybody hates their job or, does this and that. And my whole life agenda was enjoy life to the fullest. And I didn't see myself enjoying life doing that career path once I finally got into it. And even while I was at lineman school, we'd have 4-day school weeks, 3-day weekends, and I'd leave 5 o'clock at the end of Thursday, drive all the way back to Forks or Port Angeles, stay all 3 days, fish that Sunday, go home. And I just find myself all the time fishing. And I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. So I had a friend at Lamaglass, and there was a marketing and promotions gig that popped up, and he offered it to me, which was just right down in Woodland, Washington. Mm-hmm. So I went and interviewed, and after the interview, I was like, the fact that I just interviewed for this means that I want to do something else, period. And obviously I'm a fishing nut, and I love taking people out fishing. I love to always haven't seen people's reactions. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go home and do what I've always wanted to do. And if it doesn't work, I have a Class A CDL. I got all my certifications. I have a backup plan. I'm 19. Why not? So I had another friend who was guiding that we became friends when we were younger, learned how to fish together and row the rivers and everything. He started a year before me. So I gave him a call and it's like, hey, I'm going to start guiding. And we moved in together and we started guiding. Just throwing ads up on Craigslist and working the social media. Didn't really know what we're doing. We're just trying to get people to come out fishing with us. And the first few guide trips of my fall season, I was locked in. I knew I was going to want to do this for a long time, as long as the possibility to do it was there for a while, because every young guide I could imagine on the river, they've talked to some of the older guides and they're like, hey, this is not the time to start guiding. We don't know where our fisheries are going, And I heard that from everybody. And I was like, if it works, it'll work and I'll enjoy the hell out of it. And if it doesn't, you'll figure it out in the meantime. But I knew the risk was worth for the reward, and sitting here 5 years later, and I can definitely say it was well worth it. Just to see people's experiences and being a part of those experiences have been worth it in just 4 or 5 years. Making this choice, if I had to go back next year to doing another career, it's just a really rewarding job, and you get to meet a lot of cool people, super down to earth people, which, I mean, especially these days, you don't get to anymore because shit, we can't even get out of for towns most of the time. So it's been definitely the right choice in my opinion, but we'll see where it goes in the future.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, I think that's a great way to transition to another big part of this podcast, is kind of talking about some of those challenges. I mean, Caylen, you brought up how you weren't sure, like people were saying it might not be the best time because of things that you're facing with your fisheries there on the Olympic Peninsula, and both seasons changing and the amount of fish coming back. What challenges are you guys seeing the last few years on the Olympic Peninsula and the steelhead runs and regulations to target them?
You can start it if you want to.
Well,
This isn't a long subject.
frankly, there's been a lot of regulations, and they've all, of course, been geared for the sport fishing community, right? And so none of these regulations have affected me and my business because I don't fish out of a boat. I use my boat to go from place to place. We swing flies. I don't use barbs. We catch fish and we let them go. So none of this has affected me personally versus a lot of the gear guys, and more importantly, the nymphing. It's probably affected the nymphers the most of all because, for example, the gear guides, not fishing out of a boat. Okay, you can. This was a big topic because it's something that a lot of guys. I mean, they use their boats. They have a lot of nice crafts that they track really nice through all the rapids, and it puts their clients wherever they want them to be. But you can still pull over, and with a spinning rod and a float, you can be pretty, or a center pin rod, you can be pretty lethal in a lot of spots, especially holding water. Like this affected me as a swing fisherman because now it put all these guys that used to float by me in my real estate. Okay. And while it helped the fish in moving water, I think it actually put a lot more pressure in the holding water, because now places where guys used to just catch a fish and kind of move along, now they're spending a lot of time there, and instead of catching one fish, they're catching like 4 or 5 fish in there. And then the next guy who comes through, he might catch nothing because all those fish got pricked. And then, we talk a lot about the stuff that we do with sport fishing, but we don't get to, the tribal side of this thing is kind of taboo. For example, we had a steel advisory coastal meeting tonight when we're talking about all the things that we're going to do going forward as far as to help steelhead. And it comes to management. It comes down to money and funding. It comes down to what rule changes are going to be implemented. It comes down to how many fish we have for escapement, and this is a frustrating topic from a lot of people from all sides, but it's really frustrating. And this is going to be a taboo topic in a lot of things, because some people look at this as from the social side versus a logical side. But for example, we out here on the Olympic Peninsula, we cut our April fishery out of existence to help the April fishery. And we pat ourselves on the back, and this is no doubt good for steelhead. And this year we cut out March and April due to low returns. Well, the low returns, of course, being part factor into no water from middle of January to the end of February, definitely have something to do with that also. But when the rains finally showed up, which quite frankly happened the day before March showed up here, if you looked at the water flows all through March, they were epic. I was sitting on my couch drooling, like literally stomping on my toe. And the thing is that we as sports fishermen have taken ourselves out of the game to help steelhead. And for example, the whole month of April is when the commercial salmon season started for the tribes. Okay. And not a lot of people like to talk about the tribal issue because it's a taboo issue. But how, I would like to pose the question to a lot of people, how are we supposed to help wild steelhead when we do our part by putting our best foot forward to help fish in April? So you have incoming April fish that are coming in. They're the late guys. And then you have the outgoing March kelts that are going out. So essentially you have a double-edged sword. And so it's going to have a heavy effect on the essentially the season that we're trying to protect and the wild fish that we are trying to protect. And nobody seems to want to talk about it because it is a taboo subject. And I get it's a hard subject to talk about. Yeah. And I had some conversations with some people on Instagram who seem to be fully okay with the fact that the steelhead aren't going to recover as long as we hold up the social aspects of these of this stuff. Okay. And it's a heated issue, and it's something that I don't know if I can speak for Caylen on this too, but quite frankly, I don't want the tribes to lose their fisheries, but I want the tribes to be able to meet us halfway in order to help this fishery. So for example, if we cut our fishing in April to help that portion of the fishery, the late spawners, and then the March kelts, I would like to see them do the same thing in order so we have future opportunities. But it doesn't seem to be that way, and nobody seems to want to talk about this. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Yeah,
talking about it. So that's kind of what I have to say on that.
It is a super touchy issue, and everybody is scared to talk about it because it's the world that we live in and everything. But I mean, the best solution that I've been able to think of is to keep everybody happy is keeping them and letting them obviously keep their rights to go and harvest their fish when they have always been allowed to or have always done. But when you have an unsustainable fishery, nobody in the industry commercially fishes a unsustainable fishery. So why are we doing that here is the biggest issue for me. And if it is such a big issue, why don't we just go to a subsistence fishery so everybody can get the fish that they need harvested for their freezers, everybody's fed, keeps their rights, their privileges, and we start working on this issue, which it's not just that. There's a ton of different issues, but the biggest thing we do to help is we help the issues that are nickel and dime factors when there's a lot bigger issues at play. And it's just been really frustrating out here for sure, because we have our escapement numbers and we're seeing the fish. This season was an anomaly. Essentially, we got January and February, which is our rain season period. We always get rain. And that didn't start till March 1st.
It was the opposite of everything we've ever seen out here. Like, I'm used to there's some seasons where I've gotten 4 days of fishing in January and like maybe a week in February. And this year, it was Arctic weather from essentially the day after Christmas until January 2nd. Then we had a little bit of rain. And then essentially from mid-January all the way until the second to the last day of February, we had really little rain. Whenever there was a spritz of precipitation or a pressure change, there was a solid john of fish that came through. I saw this every single day. There was any kind of moisture, and we were hooking like 3 or 4 fish a day, swinging flies, which by fly standards is pretty good. Okay, if you're swinging a fly, you're hoping for a grab, right? Which is why, again, we call it the starvation stick, because it's you're just hoping for something, because it's not supposed to be easy. And the fish move in different ways in low water versus medium water versus high water. And if you're not willing to adapt to this, you're not going to catch many fish out here, because you have to stay in the traveling lane, and you got to adapt to what the conditions give you. And also, running off of, tribal counts too, when the water gets that low, the nets aren't doing as good as they usually do. And I think a lot of those guys kind of just quit fishing and they went crabbing instead. And so now you have lack of participation from the tribes. And so now those numbers, so if there's no participation, there's no numbers getting in. And so WDFW freaks out and goes, there's no steelhead coming in. Meanwhile, and I don't broadcast my numbers a lot. Okay. But for February, in water that I have never seen lower, I got 28, or I hooked 28 fish in the month of February. Which is or not 28 fish. It was more than that. Yeah, it was like 33 or 36 fish for the month of February. And there's 28 days, and that's where I got the number mixed. There's 28 days in February. And then also what I was noticing is I wasn't where the place I was fishing, I wasn't seeing a lot of sea lice fish, meaning they were moving slower, meaning I think that when it gets that low, and then when there starts to be some significant drop-offs, like these fish they'll move at night, and they're not moving as fast as they would, like, for example, when the water is high. When the water is high, I can be in the top end of some of these systems and still get fish with sea lice or fish that are black and white. So they're moving slower than usual in lower water conditions, and they're trickling in instead of shooting in like they usually do. And essentially, and this is the thing where I think that a lot of the numbers got skewed, and they're not talking about the conditions, but people are like, oh, see, we told you so. There wasn't any fish that were going to come in this year because runs were so bad. Well, there was no water. The early fish that come in here, a lot of those fish are tributary spawners. In order for them to get up in the tribs, they need water. And when there's no water, they're going to move slower and they're going to trickle in versus shoot. And then as the season turns, and then there's a whole thing of run timing that we could get into, but depending on the time of season, depends on kind of where you should be and how fast or how slow these fish move. And I don't think that was taken account this year. It was, quite frankly, taken account of participation with the tribal fisheries. And then also, and the fishing guides out here, we've all got to fill out logbooks, and they're all done electronically through apps, and all guides need to be doing this. So we can get a real number about what our fishery is doing, because that's the other thing. If our fishery really is doing bad, I would gladly hang up my rods, because I love steelhead. I want to see them succeed. But the thing is that these numbers, after we put them all in, are not displayed publicly. They're not given back to us. We don't know where the data is going. The fish checkers, for example, there was a gal below me that was fishing, and I know this gal pretty well, and I knew she hooked 3 fish, and she walked in and she walked out. And I got done with my day, and I talked to the fish checker. I'm like, hey, did you run into what's her face down here? She's like, no, I didn't see her. And I go, hey, well, I know for a fact she got 2 wild fish and a hatchery fish. Are you going to mark that down? They're like, no. We kind of have a formula that we do this stuff,
Yeah.
So this is a really it's a tough issue trying to add all this stuff up because, and here's the next thing. Okay. A lot of these fish are getting hooked multiple times. You know what I'm saying? So this is not easy.
Yeah.
And I'm not faulting the powers that be for having the job that they have, because it is hard trying to do the math on this stuff because there's no clear path. But it always seems like the biggest thing comes down to funding and whatever else. But you know, a lot of people buy fishing licenses every year, and they talk about, and we don't see a lot of creel checkers, and we've got one creel checker for the entire Quileute system. The Quileute system is the sole duck, the clawwa, the bogus shill, and which then forms the Quileute, which is why this area is called Forks.
Yeah.
And so if you got one man, which by the way, the guy's name is Tom, we call him Talking Tom because he talks a lot. He's a great dude. He'll crank your boat on the trailer at the end of the day, like the sweetest guy alive. But he will talk you to death. Love him. You know, how is one guy supposed to check everybody on how many different boat launches are on the sole duck? Like 4 or 5?
Well, I think he's doing the sole duck and the claw.
He's doing the sole duck, the clawwa, and the bogus shill. And we're not even talking about rich wine on the Quileute. Okay. One man cannot be in however many different boat launches at the same time. And a lot of guys are pulling off at the same time of day. How are you supposed to get a clear picture from private anglers? Okay. You can't get real-time data, and the fishing guys have to be fishing out their, or have to be filling out their stuff too.
Yeah.
And they need to be diligent on this, because if they want their fishery to stand strong, we have to have accurate numbers. Okay. And quite frankly, if you're not filling out your logbooks and you're not doing it by the thing, I don't think you should be here. That's the next thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And because that means you're not actually taking your fishery serious. Caylen.
Going on what Trevor's talking about, I think one of the bigger issues that we have is the fact that we have a catch and release mortality rate that sometimes I hear is 10%, sometimes I hear is 14%.
Mm-hmm.
And the sport fishermen that do it fish all the time, or just I'd say most of the Western Washington steelhead fishermen nowadays are following WDFW pretty close. And we're still at that catch and release mortality rate. And we all know that that is not an accurate number. There was no study done for that number. That was just a tossed out number. And I think there's a lot of flack about that. So a lot of people don't want to report how many fish they're catching and releasing, because it shows that there are the mortality rates. Every 10 fish, there's a dead one. Mm-hmm. And me and Trevor, I mean, we've had these talks in the Guide Association out here. And how often do we see dead steelhead in the river that shouldn't be dead?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like maybe 1 or 2 a year.
I know every steelhead that my clients have killed in the last 10 years. I know where every single one of them was. And I think I'm at 3 in the last 10 years that I know it died, but 2 of them were dead on arrival. The other one I tried and it didn't make it, you know. Yeah. And then, as Ken was trying to say too, like, you know, people are also afraid that the more fish that we report too, so gives a bigger slice essentially to the commercial fishermen. For example, if we get a certain chunk of fish, well, now the commercial fishery is going to be able to take more also. For example, when we went to no kill on all wild steelhead, which was a win for steelhead,
yeah,
and it was okay, yeah. and it was late, and we should have been doing this a long time ago. We all pat ourselves on the back and we cheered a little bit. Some people fought it, and I ran the same guys every weekend. They're like, "Oh man, I got my steelhead for this season." That's bullshit, because I've seen you whack one every weekend. Well, okay, when we went to no kill on wild steelhead, this gave essentially the green light for commercial fisheries to take more too. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? It's a delicate issue.
Yeah.
It's a really delicate issue. And so, especially with the Judge Bolt ruling in 50-50, that's the way the treaties lie.
Yeah.
And again, I believe that whoever negotiated the April thing really dropped the ball. And in my opinion, I'm not going to talk for Caylen, but the ratio of wild fish and kelts versus incoming springers, I don't believe reflects a commercial fishery for April. Especially when we're trying to protect that portion of the fish.
Yeah.
When you think about how many outgoing steelhead there could possibly be right now, and you hear, I mean, we hear from the local tribal guys, one springer or 5 springers. It's a single digit number, especially in April, most of the time for each of these netters. So it's like, 5 springers for how many steelhead?
How many steelhead?
They are using springer mash, which is, I believe, somewhere around 7 to 8 inch mash. So you're not getting as many smaller fish, which would be a lot of these skinny outgoing steelhead. But that's still, I mean, coming from my background in Bristol Bay commercial netting, we had 4.5 inch mesh for sockeye, but we were still getting 40-pound kings in it sometimes just by the snout of their nose and their maxillary getting wrapped up. So that same thing has got to be happening. And those fish are garbage fish, period. Like they turn into dog food or they go in the garbage.
Yeah, they're not coming back. And the main thing is that I'd like to reiterate is that every fish that dies does not make it back to the spawning bed. If we have a fish that can spawn 3 times, I want to look at our fishery as a long-term investing account. Okay, meaning it has to build interest. Okay, if we need to reach a certain point every year, and then when we exceed our expectations, our first reaction should be, well, we should take more fish. No, we should build upon this to where we get to a point where, guess what? It's okay to whack a steelhead here and there. Like, that's what I would like to see us get to a point to where there's enough steelhead around here to where the tribes can be happy with their take, and then a guy can maybe take a fish every year. We're not at that point now, but to say that there's no steelhead here is an outright lie, because they are here. And I'm used to having some tough days steelhead fishing, swinging flies, but whenever I've had a tough couple of days, I always call my gear buddies, and if I'll tell you what, if they weren't catching any fish, I'd be really worried about this place. But it seems like the really good gear guys out here, they really know what's going on. And, I don't always gauge my own stuff, or my own guiding is to how the run is doing, even though I did really good this year for the time I was given.
Yeah.
But I've also had a lot of time out here to learn this place, which some people have not been out here very much and do not know how this place changes. And if you don't, you're not going to catch many fish out here, because these fish move around a lot, and it's a hard place to swing a fly.
Sadly, those are some of the people that are speaking the loudest about our fishery.
Exactly. The road to hell was paved with great intentions, and there's a lot of people here and a lot of organizations that want to do really good, and they do a lot of great things. But there's some things that I don't believe that they know much about, or they can't talk about, and then it essentially becomes a topic to raise more funds for their organization, and that becomes also raising more funds tax free, It bothers me, just because, like I said, these are my own people. These are my fly fishing people, essentially. because look, fly fishing is tough. You chose the hardest path. You chose to catch less fish. And sometimes when you don't catch any fish, instead of blaming yourself for the techniques that you're using and maybe the lack of knowledge you have on a certain system, you blame the fishery instead. Yeah. And then use it as a fundraising tool, which is what I've kind of seen from my end of things. And so, and look, we all want to do good for steelhead, but patting yourself on the back constantly isn't going to help these fish. You know, it's time to set aside quite essentially a lot of the political correctness crap that comes along with this stuff, because you know, it's a lot of stuff that we've covered in this conversation, and it's stuff that's, again, taboo when talking from the state level. It's hard to talk about because it fires a lot of people up.
Yeah. You know, in your time, this is a question that directed for Trevor, Caylen, you can add on to it. In your time out there, have you seen a decline in fish through the years?
My answer is no, because I keep track of my numbers from the day I started guiding here, from the last year that I started guiding here. And this is what I've noticed. My catch numbers here in a season, and this used to be from essentially mid-January till the end of till mid-April, when we used to guide till mid-April. Some of us used to guide till the end of April. And this is with a bunch of blowouts, but my catch records here used to go from anywhere from essentially 60 to, I would say, 88 fish per season for a swing guide. Okay. If this changed, it was all because of water conditions. Because, for example, there would be times when I would not be able to fish a good chunk of February because we were blown out. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that if we have stable water conditions, like, I'm catching fish. I have not seen a huge drop in fish numbers. I'm sure if you talk to guys that are the old guard guides that have been doing this a lot longer than me and Caylen, they would probably say that. I mean, and we all know that these fish need help. But what I'm saying is that when the water is where it's supposed to be, the fish are here. They are. You know, they're, and when other people are saying they're not here, which quite frankly is bullshit.
And a lot earlier than a lot of people think too. I mean, we had something I seen on social media this year, posting pictures of spawning beds because people were interested in seeing what's actually happening versus what they're hearing is happening. We're hearing a lot of people, well, are you sure that's a coho spawning bed? Mm-hmm. And we have wild steelhead coming up. I had a guy who was plunging every day in late November and December on the Salt Duck. December 6th, first couple steelhead that he got. So we have wild steelhead coming up beginning of December, which a lot of people locally who help with the Snyder Creek program would say is partially because of help of the Snyder Creek.
Which was awesome, by the way.
And our early season fishery, a lot of people think the Salt Duck has a lot of fish, or more so, a stronger early run. And it's out of all these rivers out here, the Salt Duck was the one with the broodstock hatchery in it. But we were hearing a lot of people thinking that we got late season coho spawning. And from what I see, from what, you know, just talking with other guides and the guide association and groups, whatever, nobody sees any actively spawning late season coho that late. So we have spawning beds only being read by, I think it starts March 15th. So we're looking at the second half of our season, which is the peak. But you also don't look at an elk herd of 100 and try to manage only 50 of them and expect the other 50 to do good. It's yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It's a
everybody always seems to want to show up out here in March, which is when the weather's nice and most fish are going to be here. And I remember Caylen and I, we went to a place, I think it was December 8th.
mhm,
And I remember you got 2 wild fish that day.
mhm,
Remember that?
mhm.
Pretty
And that
awesome.
is a late season river, even
Yeah.
more so.
And but when the Snyder Creek program was here, like I would be out here in December all by myself swinging flies, and one of the best Christmases I ever had in my entire life. I was sitting in the Sappho area, and I swung up 4 steelhead, and the snow, and there wasn't a soul around. The only place that was open at Forks was a Chinese restaurant. I took some Chinese food in my truck, and stayed in the campground. It was awesome. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of early fishing that happens here, but again, the water's really volatile in that time of year, and I think that there's a lot of people that look at the river gauges and look at the forecast, and they kind of just stay home until a couple fish get put up on Instagram or they don't see any rain in the forecast, you know, and that's not the steelheader's way. Fish like water.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And tapping in on your question, if we've noticed declines of fish, I'd say probably the hardest part. I mean, Trevor's been how long have you been guiding? Steelhead.
Oh, steelhead. Oh, I've only been guiding maybe 10 years. I've been fishing for him for over 20. You know, 12. So yeah, I've been 24 years.
And so you got younger guides or guys that have gotten in fishery. I started guiding 4 or 5 years ago. Started fishing steelhead hard when I was 12 or so. Each year that I've guided, especially, I've learned tenfold from the year before. I'm always excited for the next season to apply what I learned from the season before. And like Trevor's saying, every year the water's different. This year was the weirdest one I think we've all seen, with the water anomaly and a rain season not happening for 2 months later than it should have. So it is really hard each year when you learn more to go back and be like, and honestly, from my opinion, not counting this year because it was so weird, it's honestly seemed like it's got better, but it hasn't. Just every year going forward, you learn more. So from younger guide standpoint, less than 6, 7, 8 years in the guiding biz, it's hard.
Yeah, it definitely has not gotten better, just from like the place where I started fishing, where I used to catch a lot of steelhead at a really young age, but I didn't know anything, you know, versus now where those places are closed. Okay.
And are getting better.
You know, and are getting better. And that's the thing. So if steelhead were getting better, wouldn't the Green River be open to steelheading now? Wouldn't the Snoqualmie be open for steelheading? How about the Stillaguamish?
Yeah.
Okay, I used to guide the Skagit. I sold my jet boat because they can't make up their mind on the Skagit.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a wild steelhead gene bank, just like the Solduck is now. Well, that didn't help. They missed that. Their projections by a few hundred fish. So, and that's kind of the saddest part about this whole thing is that let's just say we all put our rods up, okay, and we didn't fish for steelhead. Well, what if they never got better? You know what I mean? That's kind of the most depressing part about this thing is that look, there's a lot of people on Earth. There's a lot of irons in the fire, you know. And we don't know how this whole thing is going to end up. We're just trying to take part in it and trying to do it the best and most responsible way we can. You know,
it's pretty hard too when, I mean, Trevor knows more of how the politics of fishing goes because he's probably been in it longer. And the longer you're a guide or you're seriously dedicated to the politics of the side, you know, as a young guy, young fisherman, there's a lot to learn. I mean, just learning what north of Falcon is just like mind-boggling. So it's really hard to know where to help because we all, obviously, most of all wild steelhead fishermen, I'd say they want to see it get better, and they want to help. But the biggest problem that I see in my generation of fishermen is like, where the hell do we help where it's actually going to do a difference? Where all of these organizations, these groups have tried and tried, but nothing ends up happening. Fishing gets worse, seasons get cut more. So it's a huge question in there. Like, where do we put our effort, and how do we go forward with bringing our communities together, especially from the flying gear world?
And not to mention, we're just talking about the river. We're not talking about anything that's happening outside of the river mouth. That's a whole nother can of worms that we, there's a lot of infighting that's happening between the fishing communities, the travel community, all that stuff. WDFW, which a lot of people, the whole thing with WDFW has a hard job. They're managing a lot of different people, and there's a lot of people that think they've dropped the ball on a lot of different things. Okay. And, there's some people that would say if WDFW was managing mosquitoes in Alaska, there wouldn't be mosquitoes left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard listening to some of these advisory meetings, because there's a lot of different people talking, and it's been engineered to have all these different opinions, right? That's so we can have a diverse group of thought, which is quite frankly what we need. But I mean, nobody wants to talk about what happens outside the river mouth too. Okay, we could talk about trawlers. We could talk about, Kaylen and I have talked long nights and many drinks over the trawling industry. Okay. And I got a guy who's a biologist in Alaska, for example, and who says the amount of halibut that get caught in bycatch in the pollock fishery supersedes the commercial fishery for actual halibut. Okay. That's fucking crazy. Okay. Here's the next thing. Why our we have a test net fishery for fish that need a lot of help, which I'm talking about steelhead. So the way we decide how many steelhead are going to come in, for example, the Thai fishery in Canada, how many fish that end up in a net. We are killing fish to figure out how many fish are going to come in because we care about the fish. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of insanity. And so, I know up there in Canada, they're talking about doing a lot more fish traps. Okay, which we can trap fish, and so they're still alive, so they can actually spawn. You know what I mean? But the problem is that there's so much infighting here. We're not talking about issues that are actually happening out in the ocean. The ocean is the unknown, right? It's the portion that, Jesus, that's the thing that's really cool about steelhead, is that they're nomadic creatures that just go around and kill shit. And we don't know a lot about them. And we need to figure out what's happening out in the ocean. And, from what I've seen, so I'm 36 years old, and I don't see the amount of bait out in the ocean as I used to see as a kid. So I don't think there's as much food out there as there usually is. We can talk about warm water currents and the blob. We can talk about the nuclear stuff coming in from the plant over in Japan after the earthquake. We can talk about a lot of things, but there's a lot of that. That's why this whole thing is such a torrent, because there's a lot of different issues. The logging, okay, I can take the piss out of every single individual that has to do with this fishery right now, from fly fishing to gear fishing to logging to trawling to tribal fishing to management, to you name it.
Yeah, I
could say something that everybody needs to do better, including myself, and the Instagram generation of people. Okay, that's the next thing. If you're somebody that's out there just putting fish up on the gram, and you're holding them out of the water for a long time, and this is the fly fisherman in me. If you're if you're a catch and release fisherman, your first
primary goal is to make sure that fish goes away. It's not to get your proper photo for your page or for your pro staff or anything like that. Like that's where I think we've lost the plot in this day and age. And the older generation definitely sees it because we grew up without cell phones. The younger generation could learn something from this. And guess what? Everybody's got to promote their businesses. I get that everybody wants to show cool fish, but let's remember why we're out there, you know.
Well, you know, you mentioned earlier, and I kind of just want to add, because we came full circle to like the Instagram thing, right? And the fish mortality during COVID. I have an urban fishery that I love to fish by my house, and the amount of like poor fish handling I saw that affected this unique fishery that we have. And then, you know, you got to also consider the new anglers that came out and didn't really know like the proper way to handle a fish, or they're just trying to get, like you're saying, that Instagram photo. And then next thing you know, I'm downstream from those guys, and you know, one of the big trouts that's like left in this fishery is floating by my feet upside down, right? And that's playing into that mortality rate. You know, we talked about, you kind of mentioned that it's been really high lately, and I really think that this push of COVID, and like you're saying too, the social media has really played a factor in mortality in all fisheries.
It has. And look, and I'm not without sin. Like I look back on my old photos, and dude, I'm long arming fish. You know, I'm holding them out of the water probably more than they should be. And my whole thing has changed so much from when I started to where I'm now. Like when my client lands a steelhead, and look, we've got iPhones, we've got great technology. I can snap a lot of photos in a very short amount of time. And so essentially by the time my fish hits the net, they're gone within a minute. Okay. Yeah. And that's a minute responsibly. For example, there's sometimes it's a solid fight. Maybe that minute, maybe they need a little bit more than a minute breathing before you can actually let them go too. But I watch guys in the river, and I see the guys passing fish around from their client to the guide to the whatever, because the client wants their hero shot. The guide wants their pro staff shot for whatever company. The company wants the wants the stuff that they can put up on their thing, because if you run a social media program for any one of these companies, you need fodder. You need stuff to put up, because that's what keeps your users engaged, right? And this is how you sell your products. And so now you got a lot of people that aren't seasoned fishermen putting up stuff to get their likes and their followers and their free gear and stuff like that. And it's really kind of morphed the fishing industry to where I see a lot of ding dongs out here, and it's pathetic, you know, quite frankly, and it's bad for the fishery, and I don't see a big change in the companies, quite frankly, just because look, you're in business to do what?
So, you know,
to make money. Okay, to make money. And I've skewered my fair share of people on Instagram. I will say that and the thing that I really hate more than anything are people that fish on top of spawning beds. You know, that's like the biggest no when it comes to out here, and quite frankly, steelhead. And
that's got to be one of their most important, the most important time for that fish. And why would you want to pull it off a time where it's providing more steelhead
exactly
for you, right?
And this is a time where these fish are super aggressive, you know, because they're protecting their space. Okay. And like, for example, when we are marking spawning beds, we tie a pink ribbon around a tree branch, we tie it around a rock, and we huck it near the spawning bed. And this shows people where the spawning beds are, so they stay away from it, but it also acts as a bullseye for some folks. Right. Yeah. And I put to people like this. And for example, if you're in high school and you're going to the high school dance, Okay. And you're showing up there. There's the guys and gals. Everybody's getting paired up. Well, somebody comes and kicks you in the balls. Right.
Yeah.
That's not super fun. Okay.
Oh.
And you're like, you know what? But I still want to kind of hang out and dance a little bit. And then you start dancing with your chick again. And guess what? Somebody kicks you in the balls again.
Yeah.
And again, meaning you're getting hit, you're getting ripped off a spawning bed a few times. Sooner or later, you're going to decide that maybe this isn't the place for you. Right. And those fish are going to go away. They're not going to be there anymore. They're either not going to spawn and they're going to go somewhere else to spawn, or B, they're just going to go back out to the ocean. They're going to say they're going to abandon this whole thing. And there's no joy in catching somebody with their pants down. So it's pretty low, and it does happen. And I don't know. That's all I got to say on that.
Yeah. And this is kind of from my perspective, right? I've heard, like, I used to know a guy who was a guide on the Snoqualmie, and he was telling us about how in his day he took pride in getting his clients their 3 fish, and he's like, I could do it twice a day, and next I could have 12 fish. I'd bonk 12 fish in a day. And then you kind of look at the Snoqualmie now, right? That's the perspective. I think a lot of people, where am I going with this? A lot of people are kind of, I guess, worried about fisheries because we've had so many fisheries around us, fail. You mentioned like the Skagit and the Sauk, right? The OP had a closure, and it didn't seem like we had the numbers for a steelhead fishery, or we were just like, according to WDFW, we're kind of on the cusp. But instead of saying, okay, this is closed and this one's not quite ready yet, or hey, it's still kind of just at the tipping point, they decided to like open it up, right? And then you just put a bunch of pressure on these fish that you could have given them another couple years, and maybe we could have seen some growth in the fishery, but we won't know that now. It's kind of like putting it.
And I think that's been a subject a lot, especially in salmon fisheries across the state. Because just going through social media through the season, you'll see guides where they're talking about how the state is going to a maximum harvest capacity because we got this much extra escapement this year. Just like you're saying, why are we going on these surplus years where we should be ecstatic about this extra surplus of fish? Why are we going to a maximum harvest rate to make sure that surplus of fish didn't do anything for future generations? We went to killing 3 coho a season instead of 2, when if we just stayed at 2, it would surplus that next following return.
Yeah.
And that is definitely an issue that a lot of, I think, sport fishermen have with WDFW. And you see a lot of sport fishermen, especially in this generation, taking it in their own account. I think, for example, I seen Danny Stonedale this season where they had it bump up to an extra coho each day. And he told his clients that, hey, we're not going to keep this extra coho because of these reasons and why. And everybody was happy with it because that's what we believe should happen. We're just not all agreeing on the same page with a lot of those issues.
Yeah. I do feel like with people around, definitely younger people, I feel like there's kind of a sense of like they're almost there's like a sense of panic in some way. Like we're looking into the future, and the numbers that we keep seeing and things that keep coming in front of us, they just seem to get lower and lower and lower. And it's like, I just wonder if some people are like, well, right now I need to fish. I need to catch as many fish as I can, because who knows, in 15, 20 years, maybe I'm not going to be catching salmon or trout in this place, or so right now they're trying to just take their claim, when I feel like there should be a different like thought process at coming, like you're saying, like instead of getting that, when they open up that bonus fish, maybe if we all, or even like 50% of us, didn't take that bonus fish, what that could do for the fishery, right?
Exactly. And I mean, when you think about it realistically, if you're going fishing, if you're an avid fisherman, I mean, if you eat a lot of salmon, you only need so many a season, and then so many to give out to friends and family.
Yeah.
So, no, exactly. I agree with your mindset on that. And going back to what Trevor and you guys were talking about with Instagram and how social media has changed the catch and release mortality rates and everything, I think one thing that was eye-opening as I first started guiding out here, I think it was the first season, was seeing a couple of the local guides just pop fish off the side of the boat. 10, 12-pound steelhead. And I'm like, I wonder why they didn't want to take a picture of that and talk to him. And it's like, well, that guy's already caught a 12-pounder. He's caught 100 12-pounders in his life. So what I'll tell the guy is, hey, have you got one that size before? Do you really want a picture with it? Or is it worth just popping it off without even touching the fish? And that's something that I've definitely used in guiding the last handful of years. And it's broadcasted to my clients, their friends, and so they have the same mindset. Hey, man, probably don't need a picture with another 10-pounder. It can go without being held, whether it was held in the water or not. If you don't need to, you don't need to, and you can just let it go on its way. And it's probably a little bit better.
One thing I found too, with my clients, a lot of them are happy as long as they get a picture of the fish. Like, especially like I have clients where I rather just hold the fish, let them get the picture, and then let it go. I'm in a different fishery than you guys, but our resources are important. So me knowing how to properly not squeeze that fish, because it's a process to teach someone how to correctly hold the fish, right? You're guiding, you want to make sure that these resources are there to stay, so that way when you come back, your clients can catch this fish again, yada, yada, yada. And I've actually had, a pretty good take on, go ahead, let's, just get it right up above the net, let them go, and then you just let it go. And people are ecstatic about that, right?
What else, boys?
Well, that was really great. Just hearing about your guys' views on things going on the OP. It sounds like it's not just one thing. It sounds like a bunch of different things with a bunch of different parties involved, and stretching all the way from saltwater all the way back into freshwater, all stages of the steelhead's life. It just sounds like it's a multifaceted problem.
It's a lot more complicated once you dig into it.
Yeah, it's
nuts and bolts of it.
No, and look, and everybody wants the fish to go on and thrive, because we want to keep doing this, and everybody's gonna have to sacrifice something, man. You know what I mean? And some people aren't wanting to sacrifice some things, and some people want to sacrifice everything. And there's the saying that a river without friends isn't going to have a future, essentially. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be no one to look after it.
Yeah.
And then there's a community out here that was out here. It's built around logging and fishing. Okay. It's the fire and ice of this place. And if you go around here in the wintertime, you either see a guy in waders, or you see some guy in coveralls that's driving a logging truck, and it's been cutting wood all day. It's been going on here for a long time, and I hope that both things are going to still be going on, because there's a place. I mean, look, you still need a place you still need wood for your house, okay? And people still want to go catch fish, and I think that the two can coincide, but we just need to do it responsibly. Yeah. And we can, but everybody's got to give up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we need to dial in our management and how we actually count these fish, because one of the biggest problems we have with keeping track of our fish is water conditions. A, for catch records, and B, for reading available beds. Because just this month, it was a water anomaly year, but we've been blown out twice or three times in the month of April, which is weird. And I mean, from what I see and my experiences, I'd say almost every time we have a blowout, the gravel's rearranged and you can't see what was there right before or even 3 weeks before the rain. So there's a lot of factors to trying to keep track of everything out here.
One thing that I want to add, and I'd be interested on your take. Kind of given it a little bit, but I feel like from a perspective of conservation, right? I feel like we have a lot of groups out there trying to do conservation work for, steelhead, trout, whatever fishery that you're a part of. But I feel like a lot of organizations are on the right path on trying to get, do little things to help benefit our fisheries. But as on the road, down the right path, there's a lot of other kind of bickering between organizations that at the end of the day, the mission's kind of the same. I really wish we saw more unity between, these organizations, our government, our tribes, and just all come together to fix these fisheries.
That's all I care about.
Yeah, no, though, I think one of the bigger factors is all of these groups have different missions, and all of these groups come from different backgrounds, and a lot of these people in these groups who follow these groups listen to what these groups are broadcasting, and they don't all agree. So there's a huge division especially between the gear and the fly fishing world. God. But yeah. a lot of these groups are pro fly fishing that are very invested into these groups. And Wild Steelhead Coalition, I can imagine the fraction of gear fishermen out of fly fishermen out of that. And a lot of these guys don't come from anywhere there is a steelhead river, or a good percentage of them. So they just hear what they hear and they believe it.
No, and they leave out some pretty solid information. This is the main problem that I have with some of these groups is that it's the leaving out of all information. It's the steelhead need help, which I fully agree with. It's all this stuff like us anglers, we need to take a better stance on stuff. Fully agree with. But then when it comes to the other side, which is the tribal side, they're nowhere to be seen. It literally they go fully silent, and they go to the full social realm of things, and this is where I have the problem, because now we're not being transparent. Because if you're being transparent, you're gonna tell the truth on all different boards, no matter what the social aspect is of all these things. And I am a fly fisherman, and I do live out here, and the majority of the fly fishermen that come out here are not from here. And quite frankly, they get their information from some of these websites, and which is, yeah. I don't want to start my own website just because I got other stuff I would like to do rather than do this. I don't want to even be talking about this kind of stuff, but unfortunately, if you're not willing to fight for the things you love, you don't deserve them. Right? Yeah. So if you're just gonna lay down, then fucking lay down. But we have to fight. We're gonna have to fight for this place, because if we're not gonna fight for it, it's gonna be gone. So, and that goes for the younger guides, the Instagram generation. This goes to the old guard guides. The old guard guides, quite frankly, right now are feeling a little bit defeated, because they've been going through this a long time, and quite frankly, they're on the losing end of the battle. No matter what they've done, and no matter what they've seen, they've kind of gotten pieced out over the years. And so what it's done is just kind of taken the fight out of them. And then the newer generation, they regurgitate some of the stuff that they read and whatnot. And there's not a lot of, I guess, there's not a lot of information that's coming from every side. You know what I mean? And the people that talk a bunch of smack to me on the internet are the people that are like, well, you just are thinking about your wallet and your business and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, you know, I didn't get into this for the money. You know, I care about wild steelhead as much as anybody on earth. And I'm actually out here. And I can tell you what happens out here from week to week, literally, because I'm on the water every single day. And there's guides out here that will start crying after they've done 20 days in a row because they're not mentally fit enough to do a full guide season. It's pretty funny because Caylen and I, we do a lot of guide days because we love this shit. You know what I mean? And it's ingrained into us, and to where it's really easy. And we're used to getting up early, and we're used to fishing hard, and we're used to talking shit with our clients and catching some nice fish and going and maybe having a beer at the end of the day. So I don't know.
I've seen too, like another perspective of things is it's like there was a push to save our wild fish, but on like the other side of things, I've seen some of the craziest comments of people hopping on and being like, well, we need to just, kill all these wild fish so we can
yeah, exactly. No, I've seen the same thing. That's fucking horse shit.
Yeah,
that's fucking like, horse shit.
That's the other side of the scale. Is like
exactly
these people that are like, I'm really, we really got to save these wild fish. And
or you know what? There's so many hatchery fish out there. It's hard to know what's a wild fish now any days.
You know what I mean? And no, I've seen the same shit. And those people, they can, dude. I could say some horrible shit right now, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say this. I hate. So the thing I hate more than anything on earth are Chambers Creek hatchery fish. I don't like them at all. They barely pull any line off the reel. Okay, but I did live through the Snyder Creek broodstock program, which is a program that got dismantled by the Wild Steelhead Coalition, Native Fish Society, and Mr. John McMillan. And this was a broodstock program that was put on by the fishing guides here in Forks, Washington, which is the blueprint for a lot of stuff that's happening down in Oregon right now. Mm-hmm. By the way, when I would fish for these fish, there wasn't many people out here fishing for them, especially fly fishermen. They ate a swung fly like every wild fish I've ever seen. They were the size of fish of every wild fish I've ever seen. You know what I mean? When I catch Chambers Creek fish, they barely pull any line off the reel. They never kick my ass. Quite frankly, I strip them in. Okay, they suck. They fit through the gill nets. Okay, they come in a certain time of year. Congratulations, but the broodstock. I'm a believer in broodstocking. In some places, right? Because I believe in bringing fish from their native stream, and if we give them a little bit of help, maybe they'll come back. Instead of the big idea with a lot of organizations is if we help these fish in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be a hatchery fish, and they're no longer retain any of their wild genes. But dude, I mean, I caught a broodstock fish on the bogus show once out of the ice box. And I remember I had a guy swinging through the tail of the ice box, and there was a huge bow in the line. He was really swinging it fast, and I remember that fish ate it so hard that the line, that bow, slapped so tight and straight that water shot upstream. Right, and the guy was shitting his pants, and dude reeled it in, netted it. I'm like, oh my god, dude, it's a broodstock fish. Like, pretty awesome. Got a picture of it, let it go. It was great. But that guy, if I would have told him it was broodstock fish, he'd have been like, oh my god, that was the greatest wild fish I've ever caught in my life. And dude, it was epic to behold, and all those early run broodstock fish we used to have on the Soul Duck,
which again was a big reason why the soul duck is still good early. It's still strong. And you know what I mean? It's been good early for a long time, and now it's designated as the wild gene bank, which is the thing that people chirp from the NGOs. Okay, but I would like to say, so if if it's posted as a wild steelhead gene bank, it didn't help the fishery this year stay open. If that's what they're going off of, why didn't that fishery stay open this year? You know what I mean? And by the way, steelhead were down all over the West Coast from I've got a bunch of buddies that got up in Canada. Okay, I heard all the numbers from the Skeena. Okay, I got in Alaska for steelhead. I know my numbers there, what I used to catch when I am catching this year, and they were down everywhere. And when they're down everywhere, that essentially to me points to the ocean. It points to the ocean as something again that I think that we should be putting more resources toward in order to understand, because the ocean is where fish get big. Our steelhead don't hang out in the river to get big. That's not where they come back. It's not where they get giant, right? They get giant out in the ocean. Yeah. That's where the tuna are. That's where everything else is. The ocean is super important. It's just as important as where the spawning beds are. And just because we don't know more about it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to figure out more about it. Because that's where the rubber meets the road. So,
I agree with you on the ocean and stuff, but I want to just say I think it's very important too that we keep our, like you mentioned it, but keeping our habitats in our rivers, wild and trying to keep them as
look you got it. Look, when you get born in the hospital, you get put in the little in your little thing, in your little crib right there, and you get the utmost care, right?
Yeah.
So we need to take care of where these babies are getting made and where they're hanging out, right? And that's why the spawning habitat is so important.
Yeah.
And that's where we talk about logging, we talk about all this other stuff. Okay, so that's that facet of it. And where it comes to the ocean, like I said, we don't know where these fish are migrating. I've done scale samples for certain organisms like the Wild Salmon Center. I did a bunch of stuff for them in Alaska this year, taking scale samples, because that's the last little portion of the genes that they don't have yet, right? Because I'm super interested about how our Alaskan fish move, or where they go, if they go east and west or they go north and south. But there's a lot that we still need to learn, and we need to figure out where A, our fish are getting intercepted, and B, why our fish aren't coming back. Some are still coming back, but we need to gain speed and elevation. We need to gain interest on our investment.
Yeah.
And you gotta spend money to make money.
Yeah. Well, cool. This is a lot of info that we've covered here.
No, it's a lot to digest.
Yeah. And there's so many factors.
Yeah, and I'm sure we just scratched the surface too, just with what we've covered so far. I mean, there's so much more that we could dive into. You could probably do a whole year's worth of podcasts on this.
You can talk to 10 other guys in the fishing industry, and you're going to get a different opinion and sway on everything too. And so that's why you guys should keep doing what you're doing, and seeing what people are saying and thinking, and maybe one day we'll come out to some kind of conclusion, or maybe we'll all come together one day. And I would like to see that in some way, shape, or form to so we have stuff for the future and the survival of the species, right?
Yeah,
because that's what we want wholeheartedly.
At the end of the day, that's what everyone's organization's after. We all care about the fish. We all want to try to have fish for the future, but people portray it in many ways. So, well, we just got we're kind of rolling into our final questions here. They're kind of quick answer questions, and then we'll do an outro. So, sound good?
Sounds good.
Cool.
Sweet. Well, I'll lead us into this one, Keaton. So again, appreciate the deep topics that had just got into, and it's great information that people who either know about situation going on there or people who don't to listen in. And to kind of finish off the podcast, we'll just have some more kind of lighter questions that we can kind of end on. And
Thank God.
I almost needed a PowerPoint for the last one because there's so much.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. The first question is, tell me what you think about deep space and the theories that come along with it.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Was that a serious question?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay, dude. I can go into this too, by the way.
Well, let me tell you about something. Aliens.
No, by the way, for everybody out there, look up Bob Lazar on YouTube. Joe Rogan. That's all I got to say.
I listened to that. That was a very interesting, crazy
Dude,
podcast.
that's some interesting stuff, dude. We don't need to dive into it, but
No, we don't.
but dude, we are a fart in the wind in the history of our planet. And then when you talk about the universe, dude, it's tough to fathom. Love, religion, and the universe are three things that the humans will never be able to comprehend, right? And so I'll leave that at that.
I love it.
before we go into a black hole.
No, dude, we'll be here all night. We don't have enough battery.
All
right. Kyle, you can ask Trevor and then I'll ask Caylen.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
All right, Trevor, what's your favorite fish to catch?
Oh God, dude, man, we've been talking about this fish for like the last hour, man. It's always gonna be steelhead. Second's probably gonna be a Chinook. But the steelhead takes you to a bunch of different places. Like saltwater fish are really cool, and it's something I like to do just as it's a side chick thing. But dude, the steelhead, I'm a steelhead angler. That's where it is. More winter than summer. More winter than fall. It's the winter is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The fall and the summer, it's kind of preseason for me, quite frankly, because I'm looking for the big tug.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the rainforest. I'm looking for unruly water. I'm looking for a fish that is I a lot of times I'll be swinging a fly and I'll be like, hey, you guys hear that? I'll be talking to my clients and they'll be quiet. I'm like, you hear that? And you hear a in the background. I'm like, yeah, that's the surf. You know what I mean? If you're an anadromous fisherman, the surf should, it should make your waders a little tight. You know what I mean? It's because we're looking for a super fresh fish right out of the ocean, and that's where I get my kicks. I wanna catch a fish before they've seen anything. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's always going to be steelhead from BC, Oregon, Eastern Washington, the coast of Washington. Like I had a client this year, he told me, like, if you had anywhere to be in steelheading, where would you rather be? I remember I was sitting on a log and I go, right here, right now. And I wasn't lying. I wasn't like blowing smoke up his ass or anything. Like, dude, I could smell the ocean. Yeah. Because the wind turns at a certain point in the day, and then I can hear the pounding depending on the wind direction, also depending on where you're at on any one of these systems, and that should excite you. Yeah. I mean, we're looking for black and white fish that are really pissed off they haven't seen nothing. They want to kill a swung fly. That's where I want to be. It's always going to be steelhead. That's the end of it.
All right, Caylen, what is your favorite fish to fish for? Good luck following that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it is not far off from Trevor's, but I do have to touch in on the hunting side of me because I hunt a lot more than Trevor does, and that's what geeks me out about steelhead is specifically wild steelhead, because there's no section of river where there's a hatchery, or you don't know where they're going to be. They could be 40 miles upriver. They could be right out of the tidewater in front of Trevor swinging a fly. You never know where they're going to be. Every single one's different, just like every set of horns on an elk or deer. They're unique. But going back to the king thing, I don't know if I've met a person that doesn't like catching a king. But it definitely has to be steelhead because it's the hunt, it's the places it takes us. Insane amount of different places that it takes us, and just all the hoops that these fish go through is insane that they come back. And even a steelhead with guts hanging out of it will come and grab your fly or your jig and annihilate you. They don't give a shit. And that's what geeks me about wild steelhead, how much it reminds me of hunting.
Heck yeah. All right. Next question is, what is your dream destination to go fishing?
Oof. That's tough. Dream destination to go fishing.
Oh God.
Ooh, we're gonna have some thought. Oh, Trevor, you got something? Hit it.
Okay, so like I haven't caught a true Atlantic salmon yet, right? So the only Atlantic salmon I've caught were in Lake Hosmer in Oregon, and that fish didn't swim the ocean, right? So and this is an expensive trip, and this is also a trip that resides in time that I guide, but I would love to go somewhere in Norway or Russia, preferably the Karlovka River, or there's the Cascadia, which is in eastern Canada, but I haven't caught a true Atlantic salmon yet. Now, I'm talking like a black and white silverback pygmy dolphin kind of fish. You know what I mean? I would like to catch one of those before I die. So that's the next thing on my list, and I'd like to go tarpon fishing too, which I can nail that off the bucket list pretty easy. But the Atlantic salmon one's going to be a spendy one, and one that coincides with my guide season. So
cool.
But by the way, before steelhead go away, everybody should go to BC. That I would say that.
Yeah.
Because BC is one of the places where I really fell in love with fishing, because if you look at the Smithers area, the terrace area, like God used a bigger paintbrush up there. The mountains are huge. The rivers are really beautiful. There's a lot of them, the Tribs of the Skeena. So everybody should go to BC and check that place out.
Cool. What about you, Caylen?
So you're stuck with steelhead, huh? I think my next big stop will be somewhere in South America, close to Chile, because mainly because there's very few people that have done that. And growing up, the wish was always to go up to the last frontier, Alaska, and go fish some untouched rivers up there. And something that I've seemed to learn going up there, which there still is plenty of untouched rivers, is there's not nearly as many. They've been explored, they've been sought after, and Chile is still kind of that last frontier where everything's pretty wild and untouched.
There's more water in Chile than you can fish in like 2 or 3 lifetimes, and the Chinook down there, the Chinook populations are growing to the point where it's gonna rival Alaska in a few years. But their spring Chinook mean they're harder to catch, like on a fly. But if you're a gear fisherman, you're going to do pretty well down there. And they're big and they're angry.
And it would be cool to see just a whole nother organ or ecosystem that is supplementing the same exact species we have up here, and see what different is going on exactly down there. to possibly help something with us up here, which I'm sure there's been a number of people have looked into that. But it would be interesting to see a thriving fishery and untouched rivers and fish that are to an insane size now that come straight from our genetics on the Cowlets, if I believe. Cowlets and the Clama.
That's pretty cool.
Along with some saltwater fly fishing, which Trevor needs to invite me.
I'm doing the marlin thing in November at Los Locos, Magnolia Bay, which it's all rolling up to bait balls and throwing and stripping flies for marlin. I'm really excited for that. It's a bucket list thing because I've done Baja like 4 times. I've still never got a marlin. I've got rooster fish, I've got yellowfin, I've got pompano, but no marlin. So I'm going for that next.
Should just swing up a halibut and see how that works.
I've already done it.
Oh.
in Cape, Alaska.
Alaska doesn't count. It's too many fish.
That is true.
Trevor's been there and done it a little bit more than I have. I'm behind the bus, but headed that way.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
All right. Next question. What is your favorite thing to eat and drink on the river?
That's so
On the
tough.
river?
So I'm going to just shed some light into this issue right out of the gates. I would say from just talking with some of the guides that I know, because, 3-4 years into guiding, you're starting to get down a pretty good routine of things, of how you like to do stuff. Eating is just not one of those things on the river for very hyper-focused side of fishing guides, I would say. I mean, I see there is fishing guides where they'll be eating on the river, having lunch and everything, but their speed and tempo is a little bit different than mine.
Yeah.
I don't build an appetite when I'm so focused. I mean, when a client asks me, where was the next spot we're fishing, I'm thinking 3 spots ahead of that. We're going to be running 6 feet deep behind that one rock with a grass strip. Like, you're not thinking about food. In my opinion. Coffee, on the other hand, that's going down.
Yeah, I'll reciprocate that. So coffee, and that's essentially it. No, like the worst part of my day is making lunch for my clients, because I get up, I'll make lunch, I make coffee, I throw the coffee in the thermos, I put the lunch in the cooler, I jump in the truck. So today we go fishing, and then some guys want to make a big thing of lunch. Like, they want to sit and talk, they want to eat their stuff. Some guys, like, I'm rowing the next spot, I throw them their sandwich, they're eating it while I'm rowing, and then we get to our next spot and they keep fishing. But if I forget, I think twice in my entire life I forgot my coffee, and it was not a good day. I'm pissed, and so the coffee is super important. The food is not. It's important to some people, but quite frankly, some people, you make lunch for it, 4:30 in the morning, and they don't eat it. Okay, and then you go, well, there's like 15-20 minutes of sleep I could have got, or something like that. So it's kind of a weird issue, but
Yeah.
my older clients seem to be super cool with soup. So I'll set the jet boil, put some soup on, you give them some soup, and then they'll share a sandwich, and then they're super stoked for the day. But when it's pissing outside and it's cold, most people aren't like, hey, can I get some water, unless they need to take some pills. Okay. And I have some elderly clients, and they'll be like, hey, Trevor, can you tell us when noon is? I got to take my, my blood medication. And so you give them some water, you give them their pills. And they want some soup, and the soup thing is really cool because it's for PMA, which is positive mental attitude, right? So if they're freezing their ass off, you give them a little bit of soup, it's great. But again, this is the next thing. I hate lunch, because what I think it does is my clients fish better hungry than when they do full. They fish great in the morning, and then when you feed them, they start slacking. Dude, they start slacking, man. They start, you know what I mean? Like, so the thing that pisses me off is when people, the over menders, they're the guys that throw out there, they mend it, and the fly starts swinging great. It's like going across, look, and they hit it again. I'm like, damn it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like staring like laser beams to the back of their head, and I'm like, and they mend it, right? And it starts swinging great again. I'm like, oh hell yeah, here we go. And then I hit it again. I'm like, it's like, God dang it, I want to rip the rod out of their hand, kind of thing. But and then there's guys that their casting just goes to absolute shit, and it's because it's like essentially pouring diesel in your gas tank, right? Or you put too much oil in the generator. Okay, it starts to kind of lug a little bit. And so I think that people fish better when they're a little bit hungry. So that's why everybody fishes better at the beginning of the day than the end of the day. That's my hypothesis on it. So essentially, give them enough to stay going, but don't give them too much. If you give them too much, they're going to expect that for the rest of their time fishing with you. And also they're going to fish like shit. And quite frankly, and this is the next thing, when you hop in my boat, you're kind of like, you know, I grind my clients. You grind them till you find them, you know, and you steer them like cattle. And essentially they're working for me for the day, even though I know I'm going to get paid. But like, I am literally like, okay, like keep going, Fred, or like, let's go. And so you got to keep their feet moving, or else they slow down, or they get stuck in the same spot. So I believe lunch is a thing for some people, but it's not a necessity. I think keeping people hungry makes them better fishermen. And I'll end on that.
I like it.
Dunch is a good time.
Yeah.
There's dunch and dinner for
dude,
me.
just give them a cup of noodle. They'll be fine. I call them sodium bombs.
Gets his blood moving.
Keaton, next one.
Yeah, let's for this one, you're headed down to the river to go fishing. What is the music of choice that you're putting on?
Ooh. It's I think that one for me is it's Coochie's from Audio Slave for sure, or Whom the Bells Toll by Metallica. If we're like perfect drop, I'm hitting it with a couple close friends I never get to go fish with, that's what's playing. Yeah.
Like it. You got to have some good music to get yourself like ready to go, you know.
You got to have the pump up.
Yeah, I'm more Metallica, or but again, this is not stuff I don't play any of this stuff with my clients, but I'll go Metallica or a Bench Sevenfold, which is the new Metallica, because they switch up their beats, right? They'll start slow, then they start to pump it up a little bit, and then it's the dirty guitar, you know what I mean? It's you know. It's but yeah, that's I have my old time, like my oldies mix for my clients because they don't listen to that stuff.
Nice.
You definitely have a client playlist. Like, you know, being a younger guy, most of the guys that come out are that 40, 50, 60. They all love the 80s. Nobody doesn't like the 80s and that. You throw on some freaking Def Leppard and some Motley Crue, you're stoked.
The client singing along, you're like, all right, we're good to go. This guy's in a good mood.
Well, most of the question that I get most of the time, so I'll throw on like some Dio or, you know, something crazy, and they're like, how the hell do you even know what this music is? This was born before you were even thought of. Music ain't the same anymore.
Exactly. Ooh.
All right. Well, this last one might end up being a little bit longer, but we want to know both of your guys' favorite fishing or guiding story, whether that be a good story, a funny story, scary story, embarrassing story, however you want to take it.
Oh, Let us process this one for a second here. Funniest? You said most memorable.
It just can be like a learning experience. It could have been something that happened. It could be funny. It could be great. It could be.
You know, I'm gonna start this one. It's more of inspirational than it is anything else. So I have a guy that comes down and fishes with me a handful of times throughout steelhead season in the winter, and he's paralyzed from the waist down. Used to X Games snowmobile and everything.
Oh, was that Paul? You take Paul out?
That's Paul.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about, who we take out up here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he fishes that center pin like a badass.
Oh, yeah. So he taught me the helicopter pin cast, which is pretty epic for where he came from. Because, I mean, when you go to load and do a swing cast, you're dragging your gear through the water, which if you're running a worm, your worms, I call it, your pants are pulled down or your beads pulled down to the hook. And so he's kind of came up with this helicopter cast that was just epic. As long as there's not another rod pointing straight up in the air. But having him come out and fish with me and, you know, go through all the hoops of being paralyzed from the waist down and just having a great attitude, and his motto of just zero excuses, no excuses, just do it. And it's just been super inspirational, especially after I got in a crash last year, not last August, but the August before. And I mean, I broke my back. I shattered the right side of my face in 13 spots. And I thought I was paralyzed the first time I woke up. So going through that after meeting him and continuing to go fishing with him, I mean, the first, not this season, but the season before was the first season I guided him while hurt. And so we're both cripples on the boat. And it's just been inspirational to see what he's done and accomplished with, I mean, having a tough experience to do all that stuff. So I think that's probably my most memorable favorite situation.
That's a good one.
For sure. Awesome.
Top that one, Trevor.
Oh man. Like there's a lot of split shot and a lot of gasoline mixed into all this stuff. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, it's not tungsten clay.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Like I go into my dad fishing with a walker and watching him like fish his ass off, and because he can't wade, same kind of deal. But all my most memorable fishing things have come from rods flying in the water and having to go after them. I've had 3 instances where clients have hooked a fish and the rod's flown out of their hand and gone into the river, and I've essentially had to jump out of my jet boat to retrieve a rod. It's not something that I want to do, but it's something that's kind of ingrained in me. You know, they've all been in Alaska, but I remember one time I'm fishing with this grandpa and his grandson, and we're fishing for trout on the Uralic River, and they both broke off, and I was tying beads on for them, and I tied a bead on for one guy, and I threw the bead over the side of the boat, and I went to go tie on the other guy essentially, and the rod essentially ripped straight out of the boat, just left the boat, and I was like, holy shit. Essentially fired up the boat and went like kind of reverse downstream just looking for the thing, and I finally saw it, and I jumped out of my boat and I dove in the water and grabbed it, and I came up with it, and I look up and the grandpa's rowing the boat down to me, and I hand the rod to his grandson. It was still one of the largest rainbows I'd ever hooked in that river to this day.
Wow.
It was right off the side of our boat. you know. And then I had one time, this was really embarrassing for me because I was fishing for Chinook on the Connecticut River in a slough. And it was a guy named Tony Robbins, not the motivational speaker, but he was a guy who is part owner in Red's Fly Shop in over by the Yakima. But he was swinging flies for Chinook with me, and I just moved the anchor down because the water's high and we're fishing a slough. And he goes, "Hey, why don't you give this rod a cast and see what you think of it?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I threw the rod out there, and I just like, yeah, that was great. The fish ate it, and my hands were so wet from moving the anchor. I went to set the hook on it, and the rod again flew out of my hand into the river. And this is still like kind of spring. It's really cold, and I remember I jumped out of the boat and ended up grabbing the rod and swam back and handed it to him. And he looks at me and goes, "Trevor, your stock just went up." And we landed that fish, and I was soaking wet. And luckily, the guy, he brought a bunch of clothes, and there was some guys who had a fire on the bar next to us. So we went and pulled in, and he kept swinging, and I kind of hung up that fire and just kind of wrung my socks out. But all great stories come with some form of chaos. In my opinion, there's the feel good stuff, like the stuff that Caylen's talking about, you know, taking those guys, and you know, it's good stuff. Yeah. But chaos is, I love chaos.
Speaking of chaos, I do have to say I did remember probably the craziest scenario I've had was I had to swim after my raft, actually. So we anchored up on a sand rock shelf that's flat, sand rock. And you know, a pyramid anchor isn't made for sand rock, and it's blowing about 45 miles an hour, and we're hooked up with a Chinook, and it's sawing us off on this drop off. So we get out of the boat, I'm filming, and I'm not watching anything except for the camera. And I look over after we had a bunch of random gusts of wind, like steady 20, 25 mile an hour wind with 45 mile an hour gusts. And in a matter of 30 seconds, that raft was in the middle of the hole, over the top of the fish we had on, going down into a rapid that ended into a root wad 90-degree corner with my bow, another camera, all of our gear. And I looked at him, he looked at me. It was a client of mine from Oregon. And I threw the camera to him, buckled everything tight, and instantly went in, swam after the raft, got into it about maybe 10 feet away from the break of the tail out, and rode back on top of the hole, got the guy. I'm soaked. I was in waist waders. Thankfully, those didn't even fill up. And we got the fish, and we ended up taking off after that. But that was the first real experience I had with understanding how quick things can happen in the most random scenarios when you least expect it. Yeah. And that's just the power of the hydraulics of the river and I guess Mother Nature with the wind. But
crazy. Thanks for sharing those stories.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Not my most proud moment, but definitely a moment.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you want to take us out of here?
Yeah, let's roll out of here. Thank you guys for hopping on tonight. We appreciate it.
So thanks for having us, guys.
No, it's given our girlfriends a good amount of time to catch up. So
dogs to get tired.
Yeah, the dogs are sleeping pretty good, so it's all good.
Cool. I'm gonna send us out now. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. We appreciate Caylen and Trevor hopping on and just talking about some of the challenges that they're facing as guides on the Olympic Peninsula. We hope that in the next upcoming years that we can get something figured out and get back to catching what we love, these steelhead. I want to also thank everyone for taking the time to listen to our podcasts every week. Me and Kyle we see feedback. I mean, this is how we got Trevor and Caylen on. We had recommendations to reach out to them. We reached out to them. We got them on. So if you know someone, you are someone, feel free to reach out to us. If you want to talk about fishing, hunting, outdoors in general, we'd love to have you on. If you can, take the time to go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. You can give us a great review. We'll appreciate it, but we also appreciate the other reviews letting us know how we can improve. So we just want to thank you, and we can't thank you enough for the support we're having on this podcast and getting it started. Kyle, is there anything you want to add?
Nope, I don't think so. We appreciate again having both Trevor and Caylen on and talking about the OP, and then learn a little bit more about themselves. It's one of the best things is we get on fellow guides, other people in the outdoor industry, and get to learn more about them, get to learn about their background, what makes them tick, and more about their fishery. So it's been a great episode with a lot of great information.
On that note, thanks for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast.